Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of the first 2 episodes of Star Wars: The Skeleton Crew. I am loving this series so far, as it's a true Amblin-style pirate adventure in the vein of Richard Donner's The Goonies, with a bit of the Pirates of the Caribbean mixed in. But it's really a show that just loves Star Wars, set in an era and on a front completely removed from anywhere that Star Wars fans might feel a bit too protective of. So it just feels like pure escapism that's gonna make this holiday season a lot of fun. So let's dive into all the Star Wars Easter eggs and just really cool details that you might have missed. And before we get into this, if you have further questions about these first 2 episodes of Star Wars: The Skeleton Crew, come join us over on the Break Room channel, where Tuesday morning, 11 a.m. Pacific time, we are going to take your questions, hear your theories, and just join you in a really fun live stream talking about everything great about this show. Again, subscribe to the Break Room channel for more on that. This video is sponsored by KiwiCo. We'll tell you more about them later on. Episode 1, directed by John Watts, who created the series alongside Christopher Ford. And yes, he's the guy who directed the 3 Tom Holland Spider-Man films for Sony. This is a guy who grew up with 80s screwball comedies, so there's just a lot of 80s references in this. The Lucasfilm fanfare has been updated with the typical lineup of metallic heads and droids and masks that reflect the red and blue lightsabers. We see R2-D2, but now Captain Silvo, the pirate captain, mutinied in the cold open, and it might be based on Long John Silver. We see an RX series droid, like the one who pilots the school bus on At-Attin. These pilot droids were actually created for the Star Tours ride at the Disney parks back in 1987, originally voiced by Paul Rubens. R3X, or Rex, is currently the DJ at Oga's Cantina in Galaxy's Edge. We see 3PO and then Darth Vader, and this one, I'm pretty sure, is Anakin Skywalker's pod racer helmet and goggles from The Phantom Menace. A fitting selection, as Skeleton Crew is the first Star Wars live-action project since Jake Lloyd in Episode 1 in 1999 to just let kids be the focus. At least non-puppet kids. I see you, Grogu. Kids using terms like wizard, and this project just not being afraid of it. I said live action. I know. Rebels exists, and that is about a kid. We also see one of the monocled safety droids of At-Attin, and I feel like these guys know more than they're letting on. We see a Mandalorian T-visor helmet, and then the one-eyed SM-33, the droid of the Onyx Cinder of the series, voiced by Nick Frost and inspired by Smee, Captain Hook's first mate in Peter Pan. The music has also been updated to these sweet chimes. The music of the series was composed by Mick Giacchino, son of Michael Giacchino. Mick is having a big year. He also composed the music for The Penguin, which is a very different series with completely different tones. And it just shows that Mick inherited his father's musical versatility and ability to strike the right tone no matter the setting. We open in space and blue text appears. Since the fall of the Empire, the New Republic has maintained order, and yet remote hyperspace routes are increasingly plagued by piracy. These pirates boldly brand their armored hulls as a sign to all ships surrender or die. The Acolyte opened with similar blue exposition text. This show is set during the era of the New Republic, around the same time as The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, and the Book of Boba Fett, and the decade after Return of the Jedi, when former rebel leaders like Mon Mothma and General Leia Organa play important leadership roles in the new Senate headquartered among the core worlds, while signs that Imperial sentiment hasn't truly faded away. But since this time period only seems to be leading to the sequel trilogy era of The Force Awakens, the Star Wars fandom seems less protective over stories that get established at this point in history, especially when it's a show like this that seems, at this point, less concerned with Force mythology, prophecies, major political shifts, or any major figures from the Skywalker saga, and is really just focused on, independent pirate adventures and kids who over-mythologize the Jedi legend as much as we do. Over the stars, we see debris floating into frame as a cargo vessel in distress falls under the shadow of a larger pursuing pirate ship. We are reminded of the opening shot of the Tantive 4 in the 1977 Star Wars film, but in this instance, it's a pirate attack, similar to the opening scene of Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl, when a young Elizabeth Swann finds a young William Turner and braces for a pirate attack. This boarding drill reminds me of something that we saw the Separatists use during the Clone Wars, these large drill-shaped Trident-class assault ships that would punch through the holes and deploy droids on the inside. These are the space equivalent of boarding planks from pirate stories, and they attack the cargo vessel much like a virus, and they feel especially craven the way that they claw into the hull like giant fingers. Inside, a crew member gets rocked beside a crate full of some kind of fruit that might be Mailoran, the recurring fruit of Star Wars. The crew lining up to repel the pirates also reminds me of the opening minutes of the 1977 Star Wars when the Empire was boarding the Tantive 4. We see an Ishi Tib pirate getting sniped through the eye, but he keeps on fighting. We'll see him in episode 2 getting a prosthetic eye. When he fires his blaster in retaliation, notice they added the sound effect of a classic pirate flintlock pistol. Yeah, really selling the pirate theme here. The defending crew's cannons break one of the boarding tubes, but immediately pirates in spacesuits on tether cables zip out to blow it up. Visually, it's kind of like pirates swinging from ropes from one vessel to another. There's a Kitiran pirate, a species species that we saw in The Mandalorian and the Obi-Wan series. We meet Brutus, voiced by Fred Tatasciore, currently the first mate of this pirate crew. A while back, I thought Brutus might be a Shistavanen, the wolf-like species, but more specifically, I think he's actually a Defil, who have the glowing red eyes, like Arlel Schaus, who appeared in the original 1977 version of the Mos Eisley Cantina. Defils are supposed to have the ability to bend light around them to make them invisible, but they do lose that ability as they get older. And then we see Captain Silvo. Now, there is no other credited voice actor in the credits of this episode, so we are assuming that this is Jude Law's character, Jod Na Nawud, who appears in the prison cell at the end of episode 2. Jude Law's name appears at the top of the credits for episode 1, even though he doesn't appear until episode 2. And while he is the biggest name of this show, they wouldn't have credited him in episode 1 if he didn't appear as some character somewhere in the runtime. So really what we are seeing is the origin of how Captain Silvo / Jod Na Nawud ended up in that brig, and how he got mutinied, and how he's going to use these kids to earn his pirate redemption. While he is force sensitive, we don't know yet if he's a Jedi. I just like the idea that he and Brutus might have been able to climb power in the pirate crew by having supernatural abilities that might have just faded a bit over time. Behind Silvo is Gunter, played by Jaleel White of Family Matters fame. We see him more in episode 2. Also in the gang is Vane, the Nikto, played by Marty Batulis, who first appeared in The Mandalorian season 3, in chapter 17, The Apostate, and chapter 21, The Pirate, as a member of the pirate gang led by Gorian Shard, who we also call Gorian Chard, based on that produce beard. Gorian Shard died over Navarro in that episode of The Mandalorian, but I assume Skeleton Crew is set sometime after that, because Vane definitely did get away. Despite the vault being magnetically sealed, there is only one lone credit in there. Silvo's confidence in his speech to his crew, and that one credit being left in there just makes me think that some other rival pirate or thief got to the gold first and set up Silvo to fail and to get mutinied. One gold credit isolated from the rest feels like a personal insult, like the isolated stacks of irradiated bills left by the Joker in the vault in The Dark Knight ahead of Gordon's raid, or the one coin of Cortez's Aztec gold and Pirates of the Caribbean Curse of the Black Pearl that kept getting separated from the rest of the pile. Now, this gold credit has a New Republic logo, which is formed out of the Rebel crest, so we are deep enough into the New Republic era that they've already minted new currency. But it is interesting that on At-Attin, Wim's father gives him Old Republic credits, just for something as basic as lunch money, which ended up being a very big deal at Port Borgo. So the exact form of money and exactly when it was minted is a very important detail on this show, and we'll be digging into it. Silvo knows he's toast, and he's padded by a Grand Species pirate, and Grands normally have 3 eye stalks, but I love the detail that this pirate lost one of the stalks and it's covered with an eye patch. We hear Mick Chiquino's Pirate March. This pirate march uses the opening horn notes from the Imperial March, bum, 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 but it then tweaks the melody to turn it into a more of a pirate sea shanty. So it's like bum, 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 ba-da. Silvo goes down fighting, and again, since we don't see him die or thrown out of an airlock, I assume he did not die, and he's probably going to be revealed as Jod. After the title, the camera glides up what at first seems like the surface of an alien world, but no, it is just the bedspread of Wim. We are on a planet called At-Attin, a new planet to Star Wars, and a planet with a lot of secrets. Actually, its name, At-Attin, we're pretty sure is a nod to the alternate pronunciation of AT-ATs, or Imperial Walkers, also known as At-Ats, and I just kind of feel like John Watts might be an At-At guy. Wim plays with these toys.
Unhand me, you villain! Never! You'll spend eternity in my dungeons being tortured until you die!
The closed captioning specifically says that Wim is mimicking Jedi voice and mimicking Sith voice, though I don't know which Jedi or Sith specifically. He probably doesn't know either. Wim is played by Ravi Cabot-Conyers, who voiced Antonio in Encanto. These action figures don't even have movable arms. It's so sad. They kind of look like they might have been for other things and painted to be Jedi and Sith, like one light, one dark, and I think Wim painted their sabers to be red and green, and I can totally relate. I remember having to build janky Star Wars characters and lightsabers out of my existing Lego pieces because it was before Lego finally got a licensing deal with Star Wars in 1998. That's right, kids. We used to have to paint toothpicks and use gack or phloem to hold them in the curved hands of our pirate Lego guys, because pirates were like the closest thing we had, and that might be why I'm so down for this Star Wars pirate series. Let's go. Wim has a way bigger and nicer room than any kid we've ever seen in Star Wars before. Like, there's too much money in this suburb. He has hanging ships over his bed, a robotic arm on the shelf, also a banner from school hanging to the left of the door behind the futon chair. His father, Wendell, yells up,
"Don't forget your jacket!"
I didn't.
This is a recurring quirk of Wim's. People will correct him, and Wim will default to just lying and saying that he wasn't going to do it, or he already did it right. And this is what kids this age do, but Watts probably lifted it directly from Sean Astin's Mikey in Goonies.
I was just trying to delete myself. No. Dictate myself.
That's delude yourself, dummy.
That's what I said.
Wim eats with, of course, blue milk, but notice it's a murkier shade than the pale bantha milk from the 1977 film. Wim's school jacket includes this patch, and the close-up you can actually see Orbesh along the outer ring that translates to At-Attin Middle School Gamma, and an autumn leaf that is behind what looks like an omega-shaped symbol. This suggests that there are at least 3 school systems on At-Attin, Alpha, Beta, and Gamma, maybe more. Wendell gives Wim credits for the week, lunch money that will become very valuable when they leave the planet. For Wim to be a latchkey kid suggests that this suburb on At-Attin is just weirdly safe. Like, there are no outsiders, there's no crime, and it just means like it's not a real place, right? We see Wim running outside, and it's really the first time we've seen an actual suburb in Star Wars. Now, it makes sense that a universe that has dense metropolises and apartment housing and agricultural communities would also have a middle-class suburb, but just like the way the street curves and slopes down with the sun blinding us reminds us of Spielberg's shots of Elliot's neighborhood in E.T. We should also acknowledge a key theme of 80s ambulance stories like The Goonies and E.T. and Poltergeist, the dark truth behind American suburbia. Suburbs do not exist by accident, my friends. They were artificial developments constructed by post-World War II social policies like redlining and white flight, as wealthy families wanted to escape city centers and build cookie-cutter sanitized little utopias for themselves with malls and Olive Gardens. But what Spielberg and his contemporaries wanted to explore is how suburbia really was covering up darker forces from nature and history that just always find their way back in. Like in E.T., it was an alien child that ended up healing a fatherless family. In The Goonies, it was a pirate treasure findable only by local townies. That's how they got the name, the Goonies, who were threatened by gentrification in Astoria, Oregon. In Poltergeist, it was suburbanization that displaced human remains, creating this cursed nightmare. The kids of these families feel that falseness and long for escape, because really that's how a young Steven Spielberg felt as a kid in suburban Arizona. And when I brought this up back in August, I felt this was like a theme that John Watts might just be influenced by, but based on the mysteries around the planet of At-Attin, there seems to be a very real creepy conspiracy going down on this planet. Wim runs past a droid pushing a lawnmower, not a lawnmower droid, a droid told to use gardening equipment, and runs into an Ithorian named Mrs. Ick, walking a frog dog. Frog dogs were first seen in Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi. Wim runs into Neel.
You should not have come here.
Yeah, it recalls Darth Vader's line to Obi-Wan.
You should not have come back.
But also the way Anakin/Vader stood facing away from Obi-Wan on Mustafar in Revenge of the Sith, Wim pantomimes getting his arm cut off the way Luke gets his hand cut off in Empire, or when Obi-Wan amputates Anakin's limbs when he had the high ground. Many thought Neel was an Ortolan at first, the species of Max Rebo, but he is not. Ortolans use lower appendages as their hands and just have completely different anatomical structures. Leland Chi from the Lucasfilm Story Group confirmed that Neel is an original species for this series, and co-creator Christopher Ford confirmed it. And I just love Neel's neatly combed hair. Neel is played by Robert Timothy Smith, who actually worked with John Watts in his movie Wolves. They used a combination of a practical suit and a headpiece combined with VFX to make his mouth and his trunk move. I will die protecting Neel. The bus driver is an RX series droid like Rex from Star Tours, but we've also seen RX droids as bus shuttle drivers in Star Wars Rebels. Beside Neel is a creature with tentacles in a crate, and Neel talks about basic tables while Wim reads from his awesome story pad. Noah Chen actually translated the Orbesh for us here. The Cave of Shadows was dark and ominous, but Lena was not afraid. She glinted her lightsaber, its blue glow lighting up the darkness, ready for what lay ahead. Next slide. Suddenly, the Sith appeared before her in dark robes and a red lightsaber. You should not have come here. His voice echoed through the cave. You should not have come here. That is what Neel said to Wim. So this is a story that Neel and Wim have gone through together, or just a routine that Wim has begged Neel to do with him based on this story pad. I love the interface of this story pad device. Its slides kind of present this 3D tableau with multiple plates, but then when you flip the slide, the whole tableau rotates backwards to show a completely new tableau, kind of like a magic 8-ball when you shake it, or just like an old viewfinder toy. Now, we looked it up. There's no known Jedi named Lena, but this would have been some bastardized legend based on the Jedi like Ahsoka Tano, who, again, is still alive and messing around right around this time. And while this sets up characters like Rey thinking that the Luke Skywalker and the Legend of the Jedi was just a myth decades from now, in this case, it shows how the kids on At-Attin might have just been filtered to think that their worlds are more boring than they really are, when these sword-wielding heroes are real. They're just beyond the horizon. Kim sees KB and Fern on their speeder bike taking a shortcut. This will be the shortcut that Wim later tries to take when he's late to his test. Neel also says that him messing up his math homework was, quote, a real pain in the trunk. Oh, Neel. Now, there's some sort of barrier around At-Attin, but the sky looks very blue and clear, which makes me wonder if this blue sky, like the Truman Show set, might be projected. The bus takes an underground highway and surfaces in the city center, there's a statue of a suited figure that looks like Neel's species. On the building behind him in Orbesh are the words station and terminal. Other buildings we pass, administrative and comm center. As they leave their buses, safety droids demand they go right into the school and warn them about truancy. Yeah, there's definitely like a fascist undercurrent to all this. The droid teacher instructs,
Here, inside the barrier, we take into account the fungibility of multiple currencies by further analyzing the potential risk of loss over time of any ledger.
Barrier, capitalized in the closed captioning. It seems like At-Attin is engaged in some sort of highly structured economy that prioritizes fungibility or exchangeability of multiple currencies. That contextualizes why they use Old Republic currency. In The Mandalorian Season 3, we did learn that there were some wealthy planets that had people still loyal to the Separatists. So these could all be descendants of groups like the Banking Clan, who would be overly reliant on droids, supporting the New Republic government with like financial investment and analytics support. But also the fact that they're using Old Republic currency in mint condition. Old Republic is thousands of years in the past. So there's some like deeper, darker secret to this planet of how they've been able to stay hidden so long and why pirates consider them to be a myth. To me, that's my favorite part of the show. Both sides see each other as myths. Wim uses his Etch-a-Sketch controls to draw a Jedi figurine on his desk screen, and they are visited by Undersecretary Fara, played by Carrie Condon from the Office of the Supervisor. She wears a New Republic blue cape, similar to what Mon Mothma wore in her appearance in Ahsoka. We later learn that Fara is Fern's mother, and she's like visiting school to just keep up on her daughter's academic work. I love the detail that when Neel shushes Wim, he uses his trunk to make the noise. Like later he says he doesn't use his trunk to talk, but he does use it to make some kind of vocalizations. All the kids in this class aspire to be white-collar clerical jobs, including Runa.
I want to be a senior statistical accountant.
Ah, yes.
We learn that Neel is smitten with Runa. Runa is not good enough for Neel. No one's good enough for Neel. We've all heard that to give is better than to receive. And while that's definitely true, to give to a kid is better than to give to an adult. When a kid opens a gift, their excitement is infectious. And if that gift is a KiwiCo crate, that excitement becomes something you can share with them. And we know from experience, a lot of us at New Rockstars are parents, and we've been fans of KiwiCo for years because KiwiCo makes fun, creative projects for kids of all ages. And now KiwiCo is taking their hands-on approach to learning and fun with KiwiCo Clubs. KiwiCo Clubs is a series of fun learning adventures that keeps on giving month after month. Each crate is part of a learning series designed to build skills, knowledge, and joy with every new project. There's 5 clubs to choose from, covering everything from science and engineering to art and global culture. The crates in each club are structured to help develop critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and creativity, all while being super fun. We signed up for the KiwiCo Labs Club, which focuses on science and engineering. Our first project was this awesome archery set, which was easy to put together and honestly very fun. We lost a fair amount of our day shooting balls into a monster's mouth. We love KiwiCo, and we think you will too. Use code Rockstars to get 50% off your first monthly club crate, or go to kiwico.com/rockstars. Farah repeats some creepy talking points to these kids.
Remember, we all have a place in the great work.
The terminology of the Great Work echoes Mao Zedong's The Great Leap Forward in China from 1958 to 1962, which was intended to transition China from an agrarian society to a modern industrialized one, but also was just a cultural revolution that led to millions of people dying due to things like famine. I just think we have to be very wary in these stories when kids in classrooms are advised to leave the life-saving to the droids and are encouraged to enter just basic analyst jobs to support whatever the Great Work is. Fern and KB drive their hoverbike through traffic, and notice how all the other vehicles are using a track embedded in the road, which makes them riding their hoverbike wherever they like particularly frustrating to the safety droids. Now, a building in the background has a sign in Orbesh that reads Mel's, and I love this detail. It has a classic circular Mel's Drive-In look with the neon lights. Ironically, Mel's Drive-In is featured at Universal Studios Florida, but really it's an homage to American Graffiti, which was George Lucas's big film before Star Wars. You can see speeders parked out front just as they pass by it. Neel goes home and is the best brother to this family.
Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad.
This is a huge family, and Neel loves his life here on At-Attin, while Wim goes home to just an empty house and longs to escape. And I just love the detail of him just plopping down on the couch. KB has a very Georgie LaForge style visor on her eyes. Must have some graphical interlay. We learn that they need a new power converter. Power converters, of course, what Luke was in need of on Tatooine when he went to the Tashi station. Punk kid Bonj Palfa pulls up.
Hey, wastoids. Heard you had some trouble with your bike.
The term wastoids comes from John Hughes' The Breakfast Club.
Yo, wastoid. You're not gonna blaze up in here.
We get a great match cut here of KB throwing the power converter and then Fern's backpack hitting the ground. She runs into a subdivision that she probably wouldn't be caught dead in, a much nicer gated cul-de-sac with larger houses and a statue in the center. Inside this home to the left of the door is a mural that is, whoa, involved. We see humans, an Ithorian, Neel's species. There are actually 3 humans, including an angelic female one, a male with a helmet on the left, and then a scrappy male that kind of looks like a young Han Solo turned away from us, seated on the right. And the sky above them is a glorious crest of At-Attin with a matching Omega-esque symbol of what we saw on the kids' school patches. So there's definitely a lot of different ways we can look at it. I kind of see it as like a Fountain of Magical Brethren fountain that we saw in the Ministry of Magic and Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Like, I assume that Neel's family might be descended from this founder of At-Attin. Ms. Ick could be descended from this Ithorian founder. Despite her bad girl reputation, Fern is actually head of her class, which comes with its own nerdy patch. This society is all about patches and flair. Wendell quizzes his son Wim on the basic table of 5, and Wim says it's 1.6094. Neel before was going on about basic tables and matrices, and it kind of sounds like this is an alternate form of mathematics that exists in Star Wars. That sounds rudimentary, but also unfamiliar to us, kind of like many parents grappling with updated Common Core standards of math. Wendell doesn't read Wim a bedtime story, quote, like mom used to do, telling us that he's a single dad who works 2 jobs, who loves his kid and never stops. So Wim instead stays up reading his comic on the story pad. The Orbesh translates to a story about a guy named Druin who ventures into a forest with tall trees, who felt the force flowing through everything around him and came across the paddock of a herder and then took out a lightsaber against some beast. We see the skull of a horned creature, maybe a mythosaur, and then this Jedi faces another creature that might be based on the Rancor, but I'm also pretty sure this isn't really a Rancor. I feel like Wim must have been given the story pad from his mother, because there's no way he would have gotten this in this closed off community. We angle up on the night sky of At-Attin and swirling green clouds and uniform red lights, but no stars. I assume these red lights are drones or satellites to mark off the barrier. The fact that even stars in the night sky are a foreign concept to these kids just feels so cruel. Like, this whole community is a Truman Show bubble, and I will kill whoever denied these kids the opportunity to look up to the stars and dream. Will oversleeps and he misses the bus and he takes his hover bike. It has tassels on the handlebars. I love it. He hydroplanes on the rain-soaked street and he has to heave his bike over the barrier. Like, despite it hovering, it's still affected by gravity. It's just hovering 1 foot off the ground. Wim is trying to take Fern's shortcut. You can actually see the little ramp that she used to make the jump on the right. In the background to the left of this shot, it looks like there is a moisture evaporator. Meanwhile, during the assessment test, the droid instructs,
If you must use the refresher, remain seated and utilize your desk controls.
do these desks have portable toilets? Like, right there?
Go to the bathroom in these oversized fake office supplies.
I go to the bathroom down the hall.
What is wrong with you?
I just needed-
Why would you do
The
this?
voiceover said it would save time for business.
What have you been working on?
I don't know. I've been too busy going to the bathroom.
Or I don't know, maybe the controls are how you alert the droids that you need to brake. Probably that. Like the rebels on the speeder bikes in Endor in Return of the Jedi, Wim zips through the forest and skids into the ravine. As he tries to climb out, he unearths this hatch, and Mick hits us with some music. This was totally inspired by Dave Grusin's synth score from The Goonies, the mysterious music that would play when Mikey found the map and later when he finds One-Eyed Willie. A safety droid finds Wim and takes him back to school, where he sits beneath a sign with Orbesh reading Proctor's office. He reads news slides from his story pad. Brandon Barrick actually translated the Orbesh here. The Knights decided to build a temple fortress. Using the force, they lifted and shaped the rocks around them, creating the soaring towers of their new home. The entire fortress could lower into the ground, hiding it from sight during times of danger. With their fortress complete, the Jedi Knights found peace and solace. They meditated together, their connection to the force and to each other growing stronger. They were a beacon of light in the darkness, and when the galaxy called for heroes, the Jedi Order did not hesitate. Their fortress rose back up to the surface, and they stood ready to fight for justice and peace. Yes, we are reminded of the Jedi Temple on Lothal in Star Wars Rebels, which lowered into the ground and would rise up when Ezra Bridger and Kanan Jarrus ventured up to it. Wim tells Fern,
I saw your bike. It's totally wizard.
Wizard is a word for cool. First heard in The Phantom Menace.
This is so wizard, and I'm sure you'll do it this time.
Do what?
I also love this detail. Behind Fern is some graffiti, Orbesh translating to turd eater. I'm realizing now that we are breaking down a John Watts joint, and I broke down all 3 of his Spider-Man movies in the MCU, and they are packed with Easter eggs like this. It's a lot of work. Fern tries to scare Wim by telling him that the last kid who missed his assignment was taken down beneath school to work in the mines.
Mines?
Never saw him again.
Yeah, right. So made up.
While it probably is a bullshit story, there's still a lot we don't know about At-Attin. There might actually be mineral mines on this planet. At Neel's house, they watched the absolutely terrifying holographic circus dancers from the Star Wars Holiday Special CBS broadcast in 1978, the one that Lumpy the Wookiee watched on Life Day. They even used the same creepy music. Now, the pilot episode of The Mandalorian also referenced Life Day, and Star Wars directors are now, I guess, obsessed with working in references to that special. Wim climbs up to the roof where there is a frisbee stuck up there. Love the attention to detail. And he looks through a skylight that should definitely not be over a bathroom where Neel is having the bubble bath soak of his life. In Neel's family garage, there is a version of the St. Pauli's Girl beer sign, but with a female of Neel's species holding steins of blue drink. The boys use Jedi 1 and Jedi 2 as their walkie call signs, like the Red Squadron using Red 5 and so on. Fern and KB prank them with KB's voice modulator. The four kids debate on the rules of claimsies, and Fern tells another story.
This was supposed to be a new neighborhood development. Grandpa told me all about it. Something went wrong with the sewage substation.
She says a chamber filled up with poison gas and they started to cannibalize each other. It's a kind of chud story suburb kids love to tell each other, but it's also similar to the new housing development in Poltergeist. Remember where they left the bodies, but they only moved the headstones? When Wim says that they're stronger than Fern, I love how Neel looks down at his arms in shame. The girls trick the boys into digging up the hatch. KB uses her visor to reactivate the control pad. The lighting in the scene with the bike light and the flashlights at night remind me of the opening scene of Spielberg's E.T., where he lit the scene really only with flashlights and car headlights. Perhaps Spielberg's biggest technical contribution was just the use of dynamic lighting within scenes to imbue his scenes with a kind of magic. They find the droid skeleton of SM-33. A rat pops out of his eye socket. Wim, still thinking this is a Jedi temple, tells them how Jedi temples have secret passageways and lower down to bury themselves, quoting the story pad we saw earlier. But we did actually see secret passageways in the Lothal Jedi temple in Rebels when Ezra, Kanan, and Ahsoka got split up. I love the blocking of this.
Listen, all we gotta do is find the power before we run out of air. Where's KB? The conduit goes down here.
Yeah, John Watts shoots this all in one take, and the way Kiriana Crater comes up and then goes right back down is just hilarious. Wim wanders up to the cockpit, and KB bonks the core, and all of the colorful controls activate. Some familiar Lucasfilm audio library sound effects here. We hear Darth Vader's targeting computer in the trench run. And it kind of sounds like there's an Imperial probe droid sound effect there. Next, a headset drops right beside Wim as if inviting him to take the helm. And we see Neel's walkie has some Orbesh on it. We see send and omit and control, volume, and star code. On a whim, Wim touches a blinking green button and the ship activates. The first two episodes don't say so, but we know from the Lego sets that this ship's name is the Onyx Cinder. I'm okay sharing that because it's not like knowing that name tells us anything. The kids being stuck on this old starship as it self-departs reminds us of Flight of the Navigator, or like another possible ending of Goonies, where the kids stayed on the pirate ship, the Inferno, as it took off into the ocean. Wendell's perspective on the pine trees is kind of like Elliot and his family watching E.T.'s ship take off. Wim realizes that they're going to break through the capital B barrier, and then they do.
What are those? Planets. They're stars. I didn't know there'd be so many.
What a chilling final exchange of a pilot episode. Kids who have been so sheltered in their suburban cycles, so denied the ability to dream, seeing simple stars for the first time. Like in Star Wars, characters always get to see way more stars than we do. And here for the first time, these Star Wars characters haven't seen even the thing in the title of the franchise. I'm reminded of the Narkina 5 prisoners seeing actual daylight for the first time in several years, or the prisoners in Plato's Allegory of the Cave, chained in a specific way to only see light casting shadows on the wall in front of them, thinking that that is reality and needing a philosopher king to unchain them and open their eyes to the daylight of reality. The Onyx Cinder was that force of enlightenment for these kids. And imagine if the first time you ever saw stars, they immediately stretched into the punch it effect of hyperspace. You would think stars do that every time. I also just love how after they punch it, John Watts leaves us for a few moments in space, watching the dirt and roots that this Onyx Cinder was buried under just floating in space, reminding us of the debris in the opening image. It's really just for us to reflect on how profound these kids breaking the barrier really is. Okay, on to episode 2, directed by David Lowery. It's a much shorter episode, but a lot of really fun Easter eggs here. We smash cut directly into the hyperspace portal, and Wim's hilariously frantic scream. Wim turns it off, and the ship twists out of hyperspace with a residual blue glow on it. A very dangerous thing to do, so randomly, like you could end up in the middle of a planet and kill millions of people. It also makes us wonder where the ship was going. The droid SM-33 has awakened, voiced by Nick Frost, and again, it's a reference to Smee, Captain Hook's first mate. One eye is extinguished like an eye patch. Nick Frost's longtime comedy partner Simon Pegg also has a history voicing Star Wars characters. Fern uses some of that claimsies confidence to fool SM-33.
I killed your captain.
Oh my god, Neel's gasp. For a second, he believes her. Oh, Neel. SM-33 walks them through the controls, listing off several sets of thrusters. As when the ship took off from At-Attin, there were indeed lots of different thrusters helping its control. A pirate ship would benefit from being able to maneuver with pinpoint accuracy when commandeering other ships. But notice how he mentions only one set of flaps, because how good does it need to be at slowing down abruptly? SM-33 says never touch the whole demolition sequencer, a button that I'm sure they will punch at some point. SM-33 has never heard of At-Attin, and as he searches his memory, a rat creature pops out of his eye hole.
Hey, little guy.
Oh, Neel. SM-33 lists off other A-named planets: Atollon, Al-Alcor, and Aldhani. So Atollon, which we saw in Rebels, was where the Rebels camped out in Season 3, and Kanan met Bendu. Al-Alcor seems to be new. Alcor is actually a binary star system that is part of the Ursa Major constellation. Aldhani, though, is where the heist in Andor took place during the Eye of Aldhani, the most beautiful arc of the series. Interestingly, Smee calls it a sulfurous bog world. That's not how I would have described Aldhani when we saw it in Andor. Like, it wasn't sulfurous. It just makes me really worried that the beautiful terrain might have been destroyed by the Empire after the Eye of Aldhani incident. SM-33 prepares to jump to hyperspace to go to the port, and the rat creature crawls back into the eye hole because it's his home and he feels safe there. Back on At-Attin, the safety droid's heads are now just flashlights, and when they beam through the ferns, again, it kind of looks like the opening shots of E.T. Wendell tells him that the kids broke past the barrier in the ship, and the droids say it's a major violation, and the supervisor will not be happy, probably. So again, there's just a mystery here on why At-Attin is so closed off and what the supervisor's really tasked with doing. Rim and Neel find two skeletons, one of which is stabbed through the chest, kind of like Mikey finding One-Eyed Willie in the Inferno in the Goonies. Wim finds two pirate hats, a telescope-looking device, and an object resembling a compass, which would be interesting for Star Wars because the magnetic north of each planet would be different. We see a hat with bandolier bullets on it. But yeah, there's gotta be more to the story of who these two skeletons were inside the Onyx Cinder and what they were looking for on At-Attin. Based on the age, it seems like they were looking for it pre-Empire, maybe as far back as the Old Republic. But if it was just during like the Clone Wars or the time period of the Phantom Menace, we could be looking at something connected to the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Either way, as a Lost fanatic, I just love the mystery posed by two skeletons next to each other. They arrive at Port Borgo. Now, docked at this port is the large ship that we saw in the opening scene of episode 1, and now you can see the top has these stripes painted on it, recalling the stripes of Gorian Shard's ship from The Mandalorian. So this group of pirates must be connected to him. When the trailer footage dropped showing this port, eagle-eyed fans caught Hondo Onaka's ship among the docked ships. So our favorite pirate smuggler from Clone Wars and Rebels, who greets us on the way into Smuggler's Run at Galaxy's Edge, might show up on Skeleton Crew. Port Borgo security's turrets follow the Onyx Cinder as it floats past, telling us that they must recognize and respect the old school vessel. Like later, Brutus questions why it wasn't immediately shot down, and I just think it predates all of them. Like basically they are seeing the Black Pearl. Also, the name Borgo might come from Borgo Prime, which was a location marked on Maz Kanata's map in the Smuggler's Guide book. It originated in Legends, where it was a location in the Young Jedi Knight books. They meet this tiny ferryman who sounds like he's speaking Huttese. I love seeing practical puppets in Star Wars. This ferry has a plastic hull with duct tape patches. This species is called a Teek, who actually first appeared in 1985's Ewoks: The Battle of Endor. David Lowery was super thrilled to include this in true puppet form, according to his interview with Empire magazine. And you can see here that Fern is wearing a blaster on her waist that she must have gotten from the Onyx Cinder. So Wim was like, ooh, a hat, a telescope, a compass, and Fern's like, give me that gun. We see a Grindalid, which is the same species as Lady Proxima from the Solo film. You can also see some scurriers running around on the cables. As we enter Port Borgo, if you look up, you see some feet of pirates hanging right over our heads. And I think that's a nod to the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, where you pass under the dirty feet of a drunk pirate. Wim gives the ferryman an Old Republic credit, and he goes apeshit. Based off of this, Wim smartly decides to hide the rest of what he calls his dateries. Dateries is another name for a Republic credit in Star Wars. They look over to see a pirate puking, and a Quarren pirate watches, laughing. A warthog-headed alien that we saw in The Mandalorian Season 3, he was one of Gorian Shard's crewmates on the battle over Navarro. Meanwhile, we see that Ishitib pirate getting the cybernetic eye, who got shot in the eye in the opening scene. scene. Behind him, there's a rack of hands. They look over and see a dance club called Dance CL82. A Thelan dancer is out front. We saw these in Jabba's palace. Also, Daphne Keene played a half Thelan character on The Acolyte. In the background of this shot, someone's getting robbed for their shoes. KB looks at some creatures in cages, including this guy, a furry winged creature that looks like the same species as Fuzzball. Fuzzball was Captain EO's sidekick from the Captain EO film. So Captain EO was a 3D short film starring Michael Jackson, directed by Francis Ford Coppola and produced by Lucasfilm and Disney, that aired at Disney parks from 1986 to 1998 and then was brought back to Tomorrowland in 2010 following Michael Jackson's death. It's a musical short film with some original songs featuring Michael Jackson as EO with a bunch of alien puppets facing down an evil empress played by Angelica Houston. It's one of these just weird little pieces of Lucasfilm and Disney lore. There are some theories that Wim on the show could grow up to be Captain EO. I don't think so. So Fern and KB tell the Thelan that they're from At-Attin, and she says,
"Come on, seriously, girls, where are you from?"
Okay, so let's talk about it. My theory's probably gonna change as I see more episodes, but for now, I think At-Attin might be a mineral-rich planet that was known about as far back as the Old Republic, but in more recent times has been used by remnants of the Separatists that have just been living under the radar, bribing the New Republic to look the other way, and pirates have long wished to plunder this planet, but have always failed. But the reason it has survived is that it has these toiling suburban workers on the surface who live within this barrier, generations of families in the social experiment, to process these transactions for these highly powerful banking families, some of whom may be on the side funding Imperial sympathizing future First Order officers. So Wim and Neel order a seafood noodle bowl, and it costs 2 decks, or 2 credits, and he pays in his Old Republic credits. They nearly get scammed. Vane appears and marvels over the Old Republic credit that is in mint condition. Now, the diner proprietor says, "What do you think this is, a Kriffing charity?" And Kriffing is a Star Wars specific swear term first coined by Timothy Zahn in Visions of the Future. It was believed to have been created by taking the term fricking and swapping the K and the F. And these pirates try to rob Wim, but Fern fires her blaster in the air. SM-33 appears and goes to town against these pirates. One of the assassin protecting hover droids that we saw earlier shows up like, "Let me at ya." SM-33 just punches it like Hulk punched Thor right out of frame. I love the detail of SM-33's blaster shields glowing red hot upon absorbing blaster fire. He uses this heat to sizzle the warthog and it squeals like a pig. Another pirate gets tattooed from a smelter droid who's covered in tattoos of his own. Jaleel White as Gunter turns around in the commotion, and on the back of his head it kind of looks like he's got some Lobot stuff going on. Remember Lobot from Empire? Brutus arrives and blasts SM-33 and the poor rat creature crawls out of his eye hole wheezing. They are thrown into the brig, and listen closely to the background of the brig. Man, the Disney Pirates of the Caribbean Easter eggs are everywhere. They literally pulled the same audio library sound effect from the pirates in the jail cell at the end of the ride who whistled for the dog to bring them the keys. And you can hear this whistling on loop throughout the background of the scene. For these kids, instead of the dog, they try to do it with SM-33's rat buddy. And from the brig's shadow steps forward Jude Law as Jod Nana Wood. Again, I think Captain Silvo after he was mutinied. He says,
"The distance between us and the key is an illusion."
And he uses the Force to lift the key from the hook and float it through the bars. Mick Giacchino samples the Force theme here. Wim, of course, thinks he's a Jedi, but all Jod says is this:
"Can you keep a secret?"
So we wonder if Jod could use the Force at any point, why has he been in this cell for so long? I think he doesn't want to out himself as a Force user, and if he did use the Force to lift these keys, they would have known that he has these powers. But now that these kids are with him, he can blame the kids and their nimble rat for getting this key and not let people know that he used the Force to get out. So is Jod a Jedi? I don't think so. The Jedi Order has been long gone, and I think we've had enough Jedi who have survived Order 66 existing in the universe. I think it's more interesting if he's just a Force user who decided to pursue a life of piracy. Jude Law, I think we gotta say, a really fun casting choice. He was the most recent Captain Hook in Peter Pan and Wendy in 2023, a movie I don't think anybody saw, but we are wondering who screwed him out of its gold. Was it Hondo Ohnaka? What is the secret of At-Attin? Is it connected to the Confederacy of Independent Systems? Or is it even older, coming from the Old Republic thousands of years ago? I'm so excited to break down this series. Comment down below with your thoughts on these first 2 episodes. Big thanks to Noah Chin and Brandon Barrick for their research help on this breakdown. Follow me at EA Voss. Subscribe to all 3 channels in the New Rockstars Network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.